Hey guys, it's Sam, and today's video is kind of a response, but not quite a response, just more of like a continuation of thoughts based on a video that I saw Elliot Brooks do recently on like BookTube darlings and trope marketing and being stuck in like our own echo chambers and things. So I'm not responding to that, but more so responding to like what my experience has been lately of BookTube and, just things I've been talking about recently about feeling like kind of disconnected and like not really knowing about the BookTube darlings anymore and things like that. This is more of just like a chatty discussion video, which I know I love and you guys really love. So let's get into my thoughts about some of that. Also, Elliot Brooks' video will be linked down below if you're interested. So many people talk about how BookTube, but I think more specifically these days, like BookTok has very specific books that they talk about the most. And especially with BookTok, but I would also say with BookTube, there's a pushback from other creators who, especially those of us who've been here longer, that are like, hey, you just have to find your niche or the creators that you like that aren't just talking about those big books like all the Sarah J. Maas books or all the Rebecca Yarros books or things like that. Like those are the books that are kind of like these intro to the book community books for a lot of people, and a lot of people talk about them, but you can get beyond that. But there being a lot of very valid criticisms of how like, why are some of these books that are of, in a lot of ways, middling quality anyway, being propped up. We don't talk about these other books and whatever. And it's not that no one is talking about those books, it's just that sometimes that can be harder to find. And I would almost say it is getting harder. Like, it has always been hard, but one of my main complaints about BookTube, especially lately, and just like the YouTube algorithm, is you see a lot of the same thing because the algorithm recommends the exact same kinds of things to you. If you watch one video on a book, it's going to show you like 18 more, and possibly 5 of those being videos you've already watched. So the enshittification of the YouTube algorithm and all algorithms in general is part of this. But also the fact that there does become a bit of an echo chamber of like people talk about certain books, those books people want to read, and then more people talk about them and whatever. I will argue a little bit, for myself personally, that this wasn't always a bad thing. And some of that is because books sort of used to be better a handful of years ago. Not that all books are bad now, but there has been again, shittification of publishing especially, that has gotten markedly worse. I want to make a whole video on book editing and the fall of book editing, but I have only my own opinions about it, and I haven't been able to find like real concrete evidence. And it's a lot of an undertaking, but I've noticed, and just know that I've noticed. But one of the reasons I got into BookTube was, yes, to talk about books, and because I didn't have really anyone to talk about books with, even though I've been a big reader my whole life, but I also really like the recommendations portion of things like BookTube or any online book community. I like having things kind of vetted for me, even though that's not going to be 100% flawless all the time, but there was a portion of my time here on BookTube and, again, BookTok, whatever kind of community, but primarily BookTube, that's where I live, right? We're here now, where everything that I was reading based on people's recommendations, especially the creators that I knew and trusted and like knew that our like tastes aligned, it was always knocking it out of the park. So I like being recommended things because I used to get really overwhelmed, and still kind of do, but now I know more things when I go into a bookstore, but really overwhelmed by bookshops and by libraries and things like that. It's just so much, and you can never trust a synopsis. Like, I don't like relying on a synopsis from the back of the book for if I'm gonna like this book. It just isn't super helpful for me personally, and I will say synopses have always been kind of like hit or miss anyway. Judging a book by its cover or by its synopsis, really hard to do that. And it's gotten worse because of some of the things that Elliot Brooks was talking about in her video about the like tropification of marketing, including certain words, blah, blah, blah. There's so many synopses, again, over the years, but I would say it's gotten more concentrated recently where the synopsis like doesn't even really match the book or the tone or anything, or it spoils things that happen like 80% of the way into the book. Like, it's just not good to necessarily be picking up books just based on synopses. You totally can, I just didn't super enjoy that experience. So getting on something like BookTube and having reviews, and especially being able to like amalgamate of like, okay, a few of my favorite creators who I have like tastes align with have recommended this book, I'm probably gonna like it. And overwhelmingly, that has happened over the years. So my, like, I would say glory days of getting good recommendations and finding a lot of favorites were from like 2015, 2016 to like 2019. Not that it hasn't continued, but I would say 2020 was the beginning of a lot of bad things. But the start of really being like, man, the quality of so much of this stuff, even the stuff that's being recommended, is super going down. And that's around the time when I was starting to get, like, maybe not so much 2020, but like 2021 and 22 is when I started to get more and more disconnected from the bookish community for a number of reasons. And so at this point, as far as like current BookTube darlings, I am incredibly out of the loop as far as like what people are reading and what people are recommending generally. Like there's a few things that I know, like I know pretty much everyone is loving The Will of the Many, as far as like a fantasy recommendation. Some things that have been around for a while, obviously, like I know about like Pierce Brown and obviously Always Sanderson and whatever. But like the newer stuff, I couldn't even tell you what some of those books are at all. So I'm personally feeling disconnected from that BookTube darling loop, which has its problems, but also benefited me for a very long time. Like so many favorites I found from being recommended them over and over in an organic way. Like it also just felt different. Maybe this is nostalgia goggles, totally willing to say that. And obviously publishing and marketing and things have always kind of impacted some of this and what's getting promoted and all that. I know that. Having said that, that has not really changed, and it worked for me back then, and it's working for me less now because I am more disconnected, because I don't know about those BookTube darlings, and because I don't have people that I can necessarily go to for recommendations the way that I used to be able to. On that note, if you haven't yet done or bullied your favorite creator into doing the Get to Know My Taste tag, please do that. That's the tag that Mari and I created like last month. I had a bunch of questions on like people's taste so that people could find creators that they liked. I've already found a few creators from that, from watching people's videos, so please do that. That helps me and everyone else so much. But anyway, because of that, like sort of being out of the echo chamber, but it's not always an echo chamber, whatever. Because being out of that, not necessarily knowing about what the community is reading, that is also lending itself to disconnection. There is something very nice from a community standpoint and a community building standpoint of everyone reading the same thing, or like there being little, sub niches of everyone reading like certain things and whatever. That is a helpful way to build community when people are doing the same thing at the same time or finding connections around the same books around the same time. This is how I found basically all of my friends that I've made from bookish spaces was because we were reading the same kinds of books or the same titles themselves or buddy reading or whatever. And I also tend to prefer backlist, like a couple years backlist, not necessarily 20 years backlist, but I do tend to prefer backlist. So after watching that video about like, BookTube favorites, I was like, you know what, let me actually go back. Like I'm sure there are books from that 2016 to 2019 category that I missed, right? And so let me go back and watch a bunch of people's videos and like, there are some things that fall into that I missed, and let me read some of those, which I think was a great idea. However, I went back, I didn't miss anything. I was so involved, like, not that there was nothing, but the books that I didn't read from that time, like I went through Goodreads Choice Awards lists, I went through, and like the nominees and stuff, I went through people's favorites lists, whatever, and I was like, yeah, I either read all of these and they're favorites of mine as well, or I know I wouldn't like those and therefore I haven't read them. I tried to help myself and go back and be like, what did I miss? I didn't. Because I was super involved. And again, that was such a fun part of my BookTube experience that I currently feel like I'm missing. This is not entirely the algorithms or everything's fault, but a big portion is. Like there's this portion of like, how much is me disconnecting myself, having other hobbies, being busy or whatever, and how much is like the fact that just like the algorithms and things have gotten shittier, book quality has gotten shittier, editing has gone down a lot. Those things have happened. These things have happened in connection, and that has made it so that I've been more distant and having like overall a worse time with the like book community kind of. Like even the books I have on my shelf right now, a lot of them are things that I'm like, okay, I'm interested in reading these, obviously. I think my neighbor is doing yard work, so if you can hear that, I'm very sorry. He just started. But even the books that are on my shelf that's like, okay, I've heard people talk about these and so now I have them and whatever, none of them are that level that I used to remember of being like, oh my God, so many people are talking about this and I like just want to get into this and read this and talk about it with everybody else. Like it's all just like, feels very disjointed and disconnected. So yes, there are bad things about BookTube darlings or all of us talking about the same things. And there are also good things. There are also things about community building and things that I genuinely miss about some of that. Everyone talking about N.K. Jemisin books and reading like the Broken Earth series. That was a fun time. When Gideon the Ninth first came out and everyone was talking about that, like that's the golden age of BookTube for me, personally. And I miss it, and I don't quite know how to get it back again, which is why I'm recommending this tag that everyone do, so I can find more creators. Because yeah, a lot of even creators that I'm recommended sometimes if I go to like, fantasy forums and are like, okay, let's find some more creators, maybe find someone that aligns with my taste. So many people that are recommended are straight white men, which I'm so sorry, unless you're doing something creative with your platform, probably not gonna like the recommendations from a bunch of straight white dudes. So yeah, it's been hard. I know I've been talking about this for like literally years now, about my like feeling of disconnection from the BookTube spaces in some ways, but I do miss it, and I don't think it's impossible to get back. I do think a significant portion of this is because of the general YouTube YouTube algorithm and taste as well, that like a bunch of videos have now fallen into this like, you have to make video essays, everything's a video essay, everything's a deep dive, and I cannot wait until we swing back, not entirely, maybe just more to the middle, because I don't want everything to be a video essay. I don't want to make video essays. I find it harder to find book recommendations when it is like this video essay thing. Like, I like there to be a mix, and whatever the next thing is that gets popular from like a YouTube overall space, not just BookTube, I cannot wait for that to happen. I want medium length videos again. Bring me back those videos. Those were so much more helpful for me for finding book recommendations. So yeah, all this to say, there's no point necessarily. It's just being like, this is me sharing my experience. But if there are some BookTube darlings right now that you think that I would like, that you haven't heard me talk about, let me know. And yeah, let me know how your experience has been recently, especially if you have been in the book community for a while. You know, this opinion about like, you know, the echo chambers. Obviously echo chamber equals bad, but also community equals good, and how do we find a balance, and all that. So yeah, just want to share my thoughts about some of those things. So comment below, let me know. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.